Well, welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited to talk to you today because not just am I going to sit here and give you a wrap up of the first week in August, but I wanted to tell you about something that rather surprised me. But before I do, let me just tell you what I read. I read 17 books in August, and of those 17 books, 12 were audiobooks. One was a print book, and 4 were ebooks. When I say ebooks, it was because only 1 or 2 of them were actually ARCs, or advanced reader copies. So I kind of took this week off a little bit from my reviewing obligations, and the reason why is this. Every month I join in 4, 5, or 6 monthly challenges. As I'm assigned to a team in each challenge, I create a spreadsheet, and then I start filling in the prompts and the criteria for each challenge. And then I go to my existing TBR that I usually set up the 3rd week of the previous month, and I try to match the criteria in these spreadsheets. And I might even see if I can make a legible screenshot to include in this video. Well, Rick Riordan's name, and I might have his pronunciation incorrect, but his name came up as a prompt for reading one of his books, and another prompt that also required reading one of his books. So I had an easy choice, which was to read The Lightning Thief. So I'm okay, let's read The Lightning Thief, and that was going to be it. And then I would go on to either a review title or my next prompt that I was trying to fulfill. Well, that did not happen. What happened actually reminds me of a situation where somebody says, "Hey, Rob, you should check out this series. It is really good. It's on Netflix. You can binge watch it if you want, or it's on demand, or Roku. Just grab it and watch it." Well, that's what I did with this series, the 5 books in this series. And let me tell you what they are really quickly. The Lightning Thief, The Sea of Monsters, The Titan's Curse, The Battle of the Labyrinth, and The Last Olympian. Now, I could have just read the first book and moved on, but I really, really liked it. And I was actually quite surprised because the boy in the book, his name is Percy Jackson. He starts off as a 12-year-old brat. No better way to describe him, but there's reasons for that. But he started off as a 12-year-old, and at the end of the 5th book in this series, he's 16 years old. So it's more middle grade YA. And I'm going to tell you, maybe I was a bit snobbish because when I started reviewing, YA is a genre that I would never choose. But I think at this rate, in 2020, I probably have read 6 YA books. Just going to let that truck go by. 6 YA books, and then you add these, so over 10. And I'm kind of liking the genre. And as far as middle grade, I never thought I would enjoy a middle grade book because look at my age. Well, I fell in love with the series. And then when I got to maybe the 2nd or the 3rd book, I popped a post on a couple of Facebook groups, and I got several nice responses actually. And when most people say, "Oh, I love that series," or "I just read that series," or "I'm on the 3rd book," or "I'm on the 4th book." And then a couple of people says, "Well, yeah, I tried it, but it was kind of repetitive." And then one person said, "Yeah, it was kind of repetitive, but I haven't given up on it yet." Okay, I can get the repetitive part. I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly, because if you're reading a series the way I am, and it kind of irritates one of my friends, is if I'm going to read book 5 for review, for example, I'm going to dig until I find books 1, 2, 3, and 4 and read those, and then read the 5th book. That's just the way that I do it. The only exception to that is sometimes with some cozy mysteries that I get for review come up to be the 12th or the 13th or the 15th book, or I think a couple of the Jonathan Kellerman books are in the 30s. So I have snuck in a few books that I didn't read in order, but by far my rule of thumb is read in order. So when I'm thinking about the couple of people that said that his series was repetitive, and after they got 30 pages in, I'm like, well, maybe that is the setup for the previous book, because he kind of is bad at giving cliffhangers. So if you think about it, he left you with a pretty nasty cliffhanger. For me, it wasn't nasty at all because I just found the books, so therefore I have them all right in front of me. But if people were reading these books as they came out, boy, hangover. No, let me put that right. I lost my thought. Cliffhanger, hangover. That's what I wanted to say. I would hate to be in that position. And because I was like on a reading drought for years until 2018, all these huge series that I'm reading, and this certainly isn't a huge series, but all these huge series I'm reading already have 10, 20, 30, 40 books in them. And so I'm not waiting at all, and I'm not upset by any cliffhangers. In any event, those were the 5 books that started me off this month, that excited me beyond belief. I'm really, really happy that I read them. I know he has 2 more series, and I have those, and to those, I will be getting to those other series as time permits. So again, that's my 17 books, and as of the end of last week, it was 448 books for the year, and it's roughly 2.4 books a day. But since I printed this here, I've read 4 or 5 more books in the last 2 days. So I think I'm at 452, but that's my count. Now, other audiobooks that I chose this week. One was The Night Swim by Megan Golden. Now, Megan Golden wrote a book that I read last year called The Escape Room. And no, I don't have it in my notes, but I do have it up here. I loved The Escape Room. You know, you have an X amount of people in a very confined area, and people start to die. So it was really, really, really a good thriller. This book here, The Night Swim, was a good thriller, but it was more of a podcast type of a book. There was a murder, and there was an investigation, and there was a rape, and there was an investigation, and then a murder from of old comes up, and it gets tied into the current rape. And this one, the primary protagonist, she reports this in her weekly podcast. It was a very, very, very good book. Another audiobook that I listened to, and I'll tell you why in a moment, is His and Hers by Alice Feeney. Now, His and Hers was basically about a broadcaster or a journalist who got edged out of her job. She got pregnant, had her baby died very young, and so she had an extended maternity leave, and then when she goes back to work, they replaced her with somebody younger, prettier, and bouncier. So when a murder happens, she rushes to the scene as if, I'm going to make this the biggest the biggest story of my life, and they're going to really want me back at the job. Well, when she gets there, 2 things happen. One is the cop on the scene is somebody that she had an affair with, and 2, the victim was somebody that she knew years ago. And then another twist in the story is the cop, I think his name is Jack, and I don't have those notes in front of me. Everything pretty much I'm telling you is from my memory. But he also knew the victim years before. Not years before. He also knew the victim. So because he had contact with the victim shortly before her death, he becomes a suspect. And that's His and Hers by Alice Feeney. Now, those 2 books there are part of NetGalley's new audiobook review section. So I plan on getting or requesting 2 or 3 books every month and reviewing them as audiobook reviews. And these 2 reviews, by the way, are up on my blog already. A couple of publishers have already auto-approved me for audiobooks, so I may not even have to request. It just depends if I like what they have to offer. Another audiobook I want to tell you about is Jenna Ivanovich's 2 for the Dough. Now, I read One for the Money last month, and I knew I was going to love this series, so I needed a book. Not that I needed a book. I needed a book to... may sound kind of funny. If I'm reading a really tense book like His and Hers in The Night Swim, I need a book to dial it down. So therefore, I chose 2 for the Dough. I loved it, and the only problem that I have with that book is that I want to read the whole series, and I think it's up to 50, so I will eventually get to it. providing my library has them, available when I'm looking for them. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you about? Oh, this Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None is a buddy read and another challenge. And I say challenge probably 1,000 times in this video because I'm doing a lot of them this month. So I wasn't planning to read this month, but when I saw it on the Facebook page that this was a buddy read, there was no skin off my back to run in my living room, grab it off my shelf, and sit down and read it in one sitting, because Agatha Christie is my all-time favorite author. This is not my favorite book, but she's my favorite author, and I was very glad to read it and to be able to be part of that buddy read. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Oh, I read, no, did I think I listened to this one. It was an audiobook, The Spring Girls by Anna Todd. And this was a modern day retelling of the all-time classic Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And that is my favorite book of all time. I have read it countless times, and I will read it countless more times until I'm not on this planet anymore. So this is a retelling about 4 girls, obviously sisters, and they're coping with life, and they're living on a New Orleans military base. Let me tell you, they're brash, they're loud, they're nothing like the 4 girls that I loved when I was growing up, but it was okay. I gave it 3 stars, and I did like the way that Joe's relationship with Laurie was portrayed in this book. And I did a different retelling. I read a different retelling maybe a year or so ago. It was called Joe and Meg, maybe. I'm guessing on that one. I read a Harlequin book for a blog tour, which I believe is on the 11th, tomorrow, and that is Incognito X by Gary Croteau. I'm sorry, I butchered that name. This was a fast-paced romantic suspense about a woman that's chased by a Russian gangster. Quick read, very, very quick read. I do have my outline here, but I'm going to bypass my outline because I want to save the best for last. So I'm going to jump ahead of my outline and say that I read A Reasonable Doubt by Philip Margolin. And Philip Margolin was an unknown name to me, but I found him because I'm part of the Minotaur Early Readers Program. And what they do is they send me print arcs, 4, 5, 6, 7 print arcs a month, depending on what I choose when the emails come through. But due to the COVID-19, my arcs from Minotaur, and by the way, Minotaur is a St. Martin's imprint. Well, in any event, those arcs came to me digitally, and that's how I learned about Philip Margolin. And the book that I read from him this month is A Reasonable Doubt, and it's the 3rd book in the Robin Lockwood series. I think it was a really good book. She's a defense attorney, a young defense attorney, but she's been made partner, and she was approached by a magician who wants her to patent one of his magic acts. Well, as it turns out, he was accused of murder 2 decades ago and magically disappeared, and now he's back on the scene, and he hires Robin to help to patent his trick. And there's a lot of twists and turns in that book, and I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to spoil it. Let's see. I also read Little Whispers by K.L. Slater. I'm trying to read all of her books. I think there's only 1 or 2 left of hers that I have not yet read, and this was really good. The blurb, however, is a bit misleading, and I don't have it in front of me, but it says something about, I'm just quoting the blurb from memory, a woman moves into a new neighborhood, befriends somebody, and later she sees that woman's teenage daughter with another person pushing a man into a car, and later this man turns up dead. So the woman is like, I've got to tell the police about this. Well, before that happened, her and her new friend talked so much that she told her a secret about her past. So the blurb says that a friend is going to kind of blackmail her to keep her from telling on her daughter. But that's not how the story went, so I don't understand the blurb. In any event, I think I gave it 4 stars. It was a really good book, despite the blurb being misleading. Now, every month I put 4 or 5 J.D. Robb books on my TBR. And so this past week I was able to read 2. One was Wonderment and Death, and the other one was Brotherhood and Death. Wonderment and Death was a novella, and it was a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, or Looking Through. Okay, can't say it, but it was a retelling of Alice in Wonderland. And almost every single novella that I have read in this series is a little bit off, or should I say a little bit off the beaten track for Eve in Favoric. So it was cute, it was kind of funny, it was kind of weird, but hey, I love J.D. Robb, so I enjoyed the book. Now, a more serious book that I read by J.D. Robb right after that, and that was 41.5 of the series, was Brotherhood and Death, which is number 42. Now, that brought back the intensity that I'm used to reading when I read this series. And not only was it a very intense case that they were on, but there were things that happened, and I'll just give you a quick summary. Eve's psychologist, who is also kind of like a oh boy, I can't think of the word, kind of like a profiler for the police. Her name is Mirror, or Dr. Mirror. Well, her husband's brother was murdered, and Dr. Mirror's husband's brother was murdered, and Dr. Mirror's husband was injured. So quite naturally, Eve and Rourke come in, and Eve's going to take the case. Well, Eve sees how wonderful the Mirror's marriage is and how tender it is, and it really lends itself to her marriage to Rourke. So one thing I saw in this book was their relationship was solidified even more than it already was. So I really, really enjoyed that one. I'm kind of an emotional person, and that's why that one really appealed to me. And I'm going back to my note, my outline, because I mentioned that I was going to leave the best for last. And those are two books by Erica Vesch, and that's Vetsch, so I guess it's Vesch. And the reason that I read two is I had The Gentleman Spy for a blog tour today, the 10th, and it's already up on my blog. And so again, I had mentioned that I read series in order whenever possible. So when I found out that this was a second in a series, I decided to go ahead to my online library and get the first book in the series, and that was called The Lost Lieutenant. Let me tell you, I don't know where this author was and how many books she has out, but I will be reading them all. This book was so good. It's Christian fiction romance, which is a first for me to read that subgenre. I've heard of Christian fiction, and I think I have one Christian fiction book in my TBR, but this is Christian fiction romance, and it's also, I'm just going to say it all, historical romance or Regency romance. So with the backdrop of faith. And I loved this book. And basically this book, and I'll be really quick because this video is almost 20 minutes long already. It starts off with a guy. Oh, what's his name? Come on, Robin. Okay. It starts off with the male protagonist. And I didn't bring my phone in here. And he wakes up in a hospital bed, or he's in a hospital bed, bemoaning his injuries from the war. His leg was badly injured, but that's getting better. But what's not getting better is what's going on in his mind. And even though I'm asking you to forgive me for not shouting out his name at the top of my head, I won't forget much other detail from this book because it was that touching. Well, we know it's PTSD. We know that. But this was in a Regency era, so they didn't have a name for it. So he was very, very worried that with some of the symptoms that he was having, that he was going to end up in an asylum. So he was trying to think of a way to get out of the hospital, but it really, really wasn't possible. Well, he gets a visit from two or three gentlemen, and they say that they had a missive from the Prince Regent, and the Prince Regent wants him to stand before him because he wants to honor this gentleman for saving his godson in the war. To say he is shocked is there's no words to say how shocked he was, but for one huge reason. He has zero memory of the attack that left him injured and anybody that he could have possibly saved. It's a little bit there in the fringes of his brain, but it's all fog. And so now he's got to go stand before the prince and accept this honor, whatever it would be, graciously. The prince says, I hereby declare you an earl. You have houses and land and money. What are you going to do? And the guy pretty much says, and you're going to hate me for not remembering his name, pretty much says, I can't take this honor, but no, you can't say no to the prince. So now he's an earl. He grew up poor, the son of a preacher man, and now he has all of this wealth in front of him. Meanwhile, the prince's goddaughter was having her season in London by her father, who decided, a very, very, very cruel, calculating man, that he was going to broker a marriage for her for a specific reason, but I won't tell you the reason because that would be a spoiler. But he was going to broker a marriage for her, and in so doing, he had something else that he was holding over her head. So she was pretty much forced to take whatever man her father put in front of her. Well, through some odd events over the course of a ball, the prince sees the man that he just made an earl and his goddaughter, and he decides, you guys are going to get married. So now he plays matchmaker, and again, nobody says no to the prince regent. So what do they have to do? They have to get married. So it's not a love match by any stretch of the imagination, and because of her circumstances at home, the gentleman had no problem taking her on as a wife, even if they didn't have a good or close or even an intimate relationship. He had to protect her from her father, and her father was absolutely horrible, just horrible. So that book really, really, it leveled out so well. Faith, family, love, action, espionage. It was all in there. You couldn't do any worse. And then the second book in the series, The Gentleman Spy, it carried in that espionage because Marcus, see, now I got this guy's name. Marcus was the spy who was part of the first book. But the thing is, Marcus, nobody knows that Marcus is a spy. Nobody knows. So with nobody being aware of his being a spy, he's leading a double life. Meanwhile, he is the second son. So as a second son of a duke, he never worried about the dukedom being passed to him because it went to his brother. And if it didn't go to his brother, it would go to his brother. If anything would happen to his brother, it would go to his brother's offspring. Well, things turned out horribly. His father and his brother got killed in a carriage accident. Then his brother's wife, who was pregnant at the time when her husband died, gives birth to a daughter. So now Marcus is a duke, and that's the last thing he wants. He doesn't want the dukedom because he's busy spying. It's a secret from everybody possible, and now he's got to carry out double duties. At the same time, his mother is hovering over him. I want you to marry your sister-in-law because we got to keep the dukedom going. So he's like, Mom, Madam, he called her Madam. He never called her Mother. Madam, I will find my own bride. So she decides to start the marriage hunt for him. And then while this is going on, there's another woman. There's a woman who they spy each other at a ball or at a dance, and things aren't quite right from what he can see when he's seeing her in the situations that he's in. So he puts his arm around her shoulder, walks in front of her parents and his mother, and says, we just got engaged. She's looking at him, and he says quietly in her ear, shh, don't say anything, we'll figure this out later. And now he's engaged. And Marcus had a difficult childhood, so what he learned to do was to compartmentalize his life. Work, play, romance, whatever it was, boom, boom, boom. So he figures, yeah, I'll get married. I'm going to get married because I'm going to save this girl from what she's going through at home, but I'm also going to get married because my boss is saying go ahead and get married. So he's going to get married, but there's not going to be any intimacy, or if there's going to be intimacy, there's not going to be any love because he cannot intermingle the parts of his life. Well, we all know how that works out because it's a romance, and romances have happily ever afters. And that book was really, really good as well. I preferred the first book, The Lost Lieutenant, over The Gentleman Spy. There was nothing wrong with the second book. It's just that I fell madly in love with the first. Alright, that's it. I hope that this video is okay, and please forgive me for forgetting one character's name. Of course, as soon as I click stop on this video, the name is going to pop right in my head. But hopefully I'll be back next week with my next wrap up, and until then, you have a good one. Bye bye.